At my parents' anniversary party, they tried to erase me, but I wasn't going to let that happen. The words echoed in my head as I stood there, feeling smaller than I ever had before. My parents' anniversary should have been a moment to celebrate their love, right? A night full of laughter, dancing, and smiles. But instead, it felt like I had just been forgotten. And no, it wasn't just the usual thing where they forget I'm there. This time, it felt different, like I was invisible, like I didn't even belong. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was their 15th anniversary. The fancy restaurant was decorated like something straight out of a fairy tale. It was a celebration for them, but somehow it wasn't. I looked around the room, filled with my parents' friends, family, and distant colleagues, and the whole atmosphere felt off. People were laughing and chatting, but no one noticed me. Not really. My mom, Rebecca, looked perfect as always, her hair styled to perfection, dressed in a sleek black dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But I could see the strain in her eyes. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. She avoided looking at me altogether. I tried to catch her gaze, to give her the usual mom and daughter connection, but she never noticed. And then there was my dad, Charles. He was laughing, chatting with everyone like he always did. He was charismatic, the life of the party, except when his eyes found mine for just a second. Then he looked away, like he couldn't look me in the eye. That's when I started to get this strange, awful feeling. It was like they were pretending I wasn't there, like they had somehow managed to erase me from their world completely, and no one thought it was strange. No one else seemed to notice. I felt that uncomfortable heat creep up in my chest. This wasn't just about a momentary lapse in attention. It felt like something more, something deeper. Was I imagining things? Was this just some weird family dynamic I didn't understand? Or was something truly wrong? I stepped aside to try to get some air and clear my head, but then I overheard a conversation that would change everything. It's like she's not even here anymore. My heart skipped a beat. She's not even here anymore? Who are they talking about? And why did it sound like they were talking about me? I froze. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene, but this felt too big to ignore, too important to let slip by. I knew something was happening, but what was it? I felt my stomach drop as I slowly turned away from the overheard conversation. I couldn't just walk away, not when something felt so wrong. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of what I had heard. They were talking about me, right? About erasing me? How could anyone even think that? How could my parents, the people who were supposed to love me no matter what, be discussing something like this? I needed to talk to them, to confront them. But the thought of what I might hear terrified me. What if I was wrong? What if they weren't talking about me? Or worse, what if they were? I tried to gather myself as I walked back toward the main room. The music was still playing, the laughter was still flowing, but I felt completely out of place. My mom was standing by the bar, laughing a little too loudly at something one of her friends had said. My dad was at a nearby table, cracking jokes with some of his old colleagues. They both looked so perfect. But there was this wall between us, like they were there and I was just on the outside. I decided to approach my mom first. She was the one I felt closest to, or at least, I used to. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice a little shaky as I walked up to her. She turned to me with that smile, the one she'd always give me when everything felt fine. But something in her eyes wasn't quite right. She didn't ask how I was, or if I was enjoying myself. She just gave me a quick nod, like I was some sort of background character in her story. I opened my mouth to say something, but my throat felt tight. Instead, I just stood there, watching her. And that's when I caught the conversation again. My mom's voice lowered, just enough for me to hear. "We can't keep doing this. It's time we focus on the future, not her." Her? My chest constricted. I was her, but I didn't understand. I wanted to ask, to demand an answer, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear that I didn't want to hear the truth. Maybe it was the fear that I already knew it. But then, just as I was about to leave, I saw my dad glance at me, and I swear, for a second, he looked ashamed. What was going on? What were they planning that involved me being erased from it all? I couldn't stand it anymore. The questions swirling in my head were suffocating me. What was going on with my parents? Why did it feel like they were pushing me out of their lives, like I was just some afterthought they could forget about? I wasn't going to sit there quietly while they ignored me and made their plans. No way. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait any longer to get them. I slipped out of the crowd, trying to avoid any more awkward conversations. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront them. Not just one of them. I had to confront both of them, together. So, I made my way through the guests, my heart pounding in my chest. The louder the conversations got, the quieter I felt, like I was being swallowed by the noise around me. Everyone seemed so carefree, so happy, except for me. I was trapped in this thick, suffocating cloud of confusion, and no one seemed to care. I found my dad at the far end of the room, holding court with a group of his colleagues, his voice booming with laughter. The same old Charles, but not the same. His eyes darted toward me for just a second, then quickly looked away, like he couldn't be bothered to look me in the eye. It was like that split-second glance was a signal, something telling me he knew I was there, but didn't want to deal with me. Was he embarrassed by me? That thought stung. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to know what was going on. So I took a deep breath and walked over to him. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." He looked at me like he hadn't expected me to say anything. His smile faltered for a second before he recovered. "Mia, not now, sweetie. It's a celebration. Why don't you go enjoy the party?" The dismissiveness in his tone hit me like a slap in the face. "No, Dad," I pressed, my voice sharper this time. "I'm not going to enjoy the party. I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine. I heard what you and Mom are talking about. Erasing me." There was a long, painful pause. The room seemed to close in on me as all the chatter around us went silent. My dad's face went pale. His eyes shifted nervously. And then he said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "Mia, not here, not now." But I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. The tension in the room was unbearable. My dad's words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Not here, not now. But I was done with the silence. I wasn't about to let him dodge the truth any longer. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my voice was steady, maybe even stronger than I'd ever spoken before. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Now is exactly the time. I heard you and Mom talking about erasing me. What does that even mean? What have you been planning?" His face was a mask of discomfort, his eyes flicking around the room, almost like he wanted to run away. But there was nowhere to go, not anymore. I looked around at the people in the room, and I saw it. The uncomfortable glances, the whispering. Everyone was suddenly watching. No one was laughing now. I was the center of attention, but not in the way I'd ever wanted. It was like I was holding up a mirror to the entire party, showing them the cracks in my family that no one had dared to talk about. Then my Aunt Carla, who was standing near the edge of the crowd, stepped forward. She'd always been close to me, more like a second mom, really. But today, her eyes were filled with hesitation. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but stopped short. After a long pause, she quietly spoke. "Mia, this is not the place. We can talk about this later. Please, just—" "No!" I cut her off. I couldn't let them silence me. "You've been talking about me, haven't you? Everyone's been talking about me like I'm not even here. I don't want to hear later. I want to know now. Why are you trying to erase me?" The room went completely still. Every single face turned toward me, the air so thick with anticipation that it felt like I couldn't breathe. My dad, who had been the pillar of calm in our family, now looked like he was going to crumble. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time all night, there was no mask of reassurance, just guilt and fear. He swallowed hard, and his voice shook when he finally spoke. "Mia, Before he could finish, I saw my mom approach. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, as if she was carrying the weight of the entire world on them. She stopped in front of me, and I could tell that this was it. This was the moment everything was about to spill out. "Mia," she said quietly, "it's time we told you the truth." I felt my body go cold. My entire life had been building up to this one moment, this one conversation. The words that came next would change everything. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was silent, everyone waiting, watching. It felt like time had stopped, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for my mom to speak. And then she did. "Mia," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I've been meaning to tell you this for a while, but I didn't know how. Your father and we've been talking, and we've come to a decision." I could feel the air around me get heavier with each word she spoke. What decision? Her gaze dropped for a moment, like she couldn't bear to look at me. I could tell she was struggling with this, but that didn't make it any easier. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, and I braced myself for whatever came next. She took a deep breath. "We've been in talks with a lawyer about custody, about your future." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't process them at first. Custody? Future? What did that even mean? My dad stood silently beside her, his face pale, his eyes downcast. I saw guilt and shame all over him. He wasn't speaking, but I could tell this wasn't easy for him either. "The truth is, Mia," my mom continued, her voice trembling, "we've been struggling for a while, and we think it might be best for you to live with Aunt Carla. We think it'll be better for you to get away from the constant tension between your dad and me." A wave of disbelief hit me. They were sending me away? They were seriously talking about splitting up my life, my entire world, as if I was just a problem to be solved? "No," I whispered, barely able to form the word. You can't just send me away. I'm your daughter." Aunt Carla, who had been standing quietly in the background, stepped forward again. She placed a hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. I couldn't even look at her. My whole body was shaking, my breath coming in short, frantic bursts. "I'm sorry, Mia," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We didn't want to hurt you, but your mom and dad think this is the best thing for you. You've got to understand." "No!" I snapped, pushing her hand off my shoulder. I don't understand. I'm not a problem. There was a long, aching pause. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for me to say something else. I could feel the tears starting to well up in my eyes, but I wasn't going to let them fall. Not now. Not when everything felt so broken. And then, just as the weight of it all was about to crush me, I stood taller. My fists clenched, and my voice came out strong, louder than I ever thought I could be. You don't get to erase me. You don't get to decide my future. I am not going anywhere. The room went silent. For the first time all night, the adults were the ones who couldn't speak. I had said the one thing they didn't expect me to say. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't powerless. I had a voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my parents, take that from me. For a moment, everything stood still. But then, slowly, my mom and dad turned toward each other. The tension between them seemed to melt just a little, as if my words had cracked open something they hadn't been willing to acknowledge. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't resolved. But at least we were talking. At least I had finally stood up for myself. My dad stepped forward, his expression softer now. Mia, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to do what we thought was best. But you're right. We can't just make decisions without considering you. We need to talk more, together. My mom nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Mia. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter. You do matter. And we will work this out. I promise. It wasn't the perfect ending. There were still a lot of things we had to figure out, a lot of hurt that needed healing. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was no longer invisible. I was seen. And that meant everything. As the night went on, things didn't go back to normal, not right away. But the cracks had started to show, and that was the first step toward putting everything back together. When the party finally ended, I stood outside the restaurant, the cold night air filling my lungs. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The battle wasn't over, but I had won the first round. I had made myself heard, and that was enough.